Hospital Porter's pride and dignity stop the New World Order. Welcome to Herpanwo TV. This is another roving review. I'm going to go and see something and I want to bring you guys along with me for the journey, as I often do. This time it's not a film I'm going to go and see, it's a live show. It is a live show in which it's called, I can't remember what it's called, I'll tell you in a minute, but it's a live presentation by a guy called Marlon Solomon. Let's have a look at it.
So let's have a look at the event I'm going to see tonight. It's called Conspiracy Theory, A Lizard's Tale. And it says here, details. Marlon is a Jew. This didn't bother him much until he discovered that some people he knew didn't believe the Holocaust happened. From 9/11 to shape-shifting lizards and Holocaust denial. This is a darkly comic tale of one man's journey through the conspiracy underworld. Marlon explores why conspiracy theories are more popular than ever, how fake news gives fresh currency to ancient slander, and how this all relates to current issues in the Labour Party. It is a comic tale which is no laughing matter. Conspiracy Theory A Lizard's Tale is a piece of documentary theatre. In 2018 it became the first one-person show to be formed in the Houses of Parliament. Wow. It also won Best Spoken Word at Greater Manchester's Fringe Festival the same year. Oh, right. It's described as funny, moving, at some points deeply disturbing, and provides absolutely essential context for the worst aspects of how we live now. That's by David Baddiel, the comedian, he used to do a show called Skinner and Baddiel, I remember. This is shrewd, funny and important. That's Jonathan Threeland from, guess what? The Guardian. Yeah. And this is from my lookalike Al Murray, the pub landlord. Compelling, shocking and essential. This is A Lizard's Tale is a devastating show, informative, absorbing and very funny. The funniest show about anti-Semitism on the Fringe, or anywhere I expect. That's by David Schneider, whoever the hell he is. And it's got a content warning. Contains one brief reference to sexual violence. Okay, so let's go and see that. But first of all, I'm going to give you a little bit more intro into the person performing this show, Marlon Solomon. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of a background here, because Mr. Solomon came to my attention a couple of years ago when he wrote this article. This is his blog here. It's called marlonsolomon.wordpress.com, and Half Chips, Half Rice, which is an interesting title for the blog. Anyway, it says here, forget the lizards, David Icke is dangerous, and we should take him seriously. Oh my goodness me. David, are you watching, mate? You're dangerous. Anyway, so why is David dangerous? Let's have a listen. Come on in, Mr. Solomon. Hit me with it. David Icke is a former footballer and sports presenter who has been one of the world's leading conspiracy theorists for over 20 years. He believes that an evil agenda is being enacted on the human race by the Babylonian Brotherhood, supernatural reptilian overlords. You know, the obvious stuff. Icke believes that we are literally living in the Matrix. Quote, we are like droplets of water in an ocean of awareness. We are individual at one level and still part of the infinite whole, unquote. He calls this infinite awareness. Unfortunately for us, these malign reptilian overlords are mucking the whole thing up. They project their extra-dimensional consciousness into elite corporal hosts. The reptilian human hybrids have invaded every nation and system on Earth in order to fulfill their dastardly ambitions, where humans will soon be microchips and live as slaves under their one world government. This is in brackets. To lighten the mood when trawling through this guff, I find it helps to say one world government in an American movie trailer voice. One world government. Icke's politics today are a combination of most of the dominant themes of contemporary neo-fascism, mixed with a smattering of topics culled from the US militia movement, European and Middle Eastern conspiracy theories, and, more recently and predictably, Russian state propaganda. In America, for instance, he opposes gun controls, a plot by the elite, which has deliberately orchestrated numerous mass shootings to whip up opposition to guns. Far-right dailies such as Veterans Today and white supremacist site Stormfront are teeming with links to Icke's articles and videos. In fact, one cursory search on Veterans Today brings well over 1,000 results for David Icke. Icke is on a mission to educate and free the subjugated masses. He offers hope and freedom from the grip of our satanic blood-drinking rulers. He assures us that we can tune into the truth vibrations, and we can rise up as one against the reptilian overlords. The problem is that these overlords are Jewish. Well, of course they are. Are they? Okay, this is Ben here interjecting. David specifically states that the overlords are not Jewish. When he's using the overlords are not Jewish, is he actually using code for the overlords are Jewish? Is that it, Marlon? Anyway, Marlon continues. So how does a fascist ideologue incite hatred against Jews to sell out crowds in Britain and get away with it? I'm going to interject again now. This is Ben talking. He doesn't incite hatred towards Jews. He doesn't incite hatred towards anyone. Back to Marlon. It's the question the UK media has been neglecting or unwilling to answer, and is the point of this hastily convened blog. Ike is playing to a sellout crowd in Manchester next week, a city with a large, thriving Jewish community dating back over 100 years, and one that I am a part of. Yet I seem to have woken in a world where extreme anti-Semitic rhetoric and incitement is ignored and deflected because the perpetrator also believes in aliens. A place where belief in ET precludes you from being a bigot. Perhaps we need to be more attentive to Ike when he unironically says, "It's time to wake up." Ike is in fact selling out stadiums worldwide and has been doing so for years, preaching ancient and modern anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and inciting his bewitched followers to rise up against these, mostly Jewish, totalitarian overlords. Oh, it's mostly Jewish now, is it? All right. Ike is more popular than ever. No other conspiracy theorist sells out to theatres and stadiums worldwide. He is clearly seen by many as simply that bloke on Wogan who said he was the son of God. Perhaps it would be more prudent to go with he's that Holocaust denier who spreads anti-Jewish hatred and neo-fascist ideology to sold-out venues around the world. Not quite as catchy, I know. Okay, it's Ben here. I'm going to interject again. David Icke is not a Holocaust denier, and he doesn't spread anti-Jewish hatred. It's simple as that. I mean, I don't qualify it in any way. I don't have any details. It's simply that. Anyway, back to Marlon. We seem to see Icke as a likeable fool rather than the dangerous individual he really is. As Justine Ehrlich pointed out to me, it's the kind of crypto-fascism you need to get knee-deep in to call that in part is why it's so dirty. And no one is calling it out. If an imam was publicly heard spouting 10% of Icke's repertoire to the right-wing press, he would have a field day, yet Icke preaches his psychotic malady to full theatres, while barely a murmur of protest will be heard from the anti-racist organisations and Jewish groups. Icke is a mere footnote in the incisive and compelling works on conspiracy culture by David Aronovich, Voodoo Histories, and Jonathan Kay among the truthers. However, it is rather telling that he gets more attention in Nicholas Goodrick Clarke's excellent work on far-right sects, Black Sun, Aryan cults, esoteric Nazism, and the politics of identity. The corollary between neo-Nazism, fascism, and the New World Order conspiracism is well documented and was around long before David Icke. To see the attraction New World Order conspiracism has for neo-Nazi groups, Goodrick Clarke writes, by declaring war on a secret ruling elite that enslaves modern people, the conspiracy theorists invoke a lethal projection. The elite is identified as totalitarian, anti-democratic, contemptuous of the people. The people are portrayed as helpless, unsuspecting victims of vicious plots, alien abductions, implantation, and all manner of personal violations. Covert actions, violence, terrorism, all the means the elite stand accused of, employing themselves, are permitted to the victims as well, so they may exterminate the conspirators and recover their lost autonomy. That is why David Icke is a pin-up for some on the far right. But with his anti-Semitic anti-globalism, he probably has more acolytes on the fringe of the far left. Either way, he's undoubtedly a dangerous individual. Oh, God. I'm not going to read any more of this. I'm not going to go on with this. I've read about half this article, and at no point have we heard about exactly what this malady that David talks about, this retarded guff, and all the other things that Marlon is using here, all the other words, all the terms. He's not actually described a single point that David Icke makes. All he says is, when he says exactly the same thing that we've heard before, exactly the same rubbish that we've heard, and we've been hearing on and off since 1993, when The Guardian first published their takedown article of David Icke long ago. when he says lizards, he really means Jews. And it just keeps repeating. It just keeps on repeating over and over again. I mean, it comes in waves, it ebbs and flows. There's a kind of sine wave of insanity and relative rationality, but it just keeps on. It won't stop. It won't stop at all. Now, I actually put a comment on here. I just wrote a comment on this article here about the whole thing, and it's just to say what I thought, and I wondered if it would be published. I kept it simple, I kept it straightforward, and I just said this. This is utter drivel, and it's not even original. It first came up in the early 90s and was swiftly demolished, so why are you trying to reassemble it again? David Icke states very clearly and comprehensively that Jews are not to be blamed for any of the conspiracies he talks about. And to his credit, Marlon published it, so that's something. I really thought he wasn't going to publish it. And there's several other people who have posted here defending David, which is good. I just really think that, well, maybe he has a certain modicum for free speech, Marlon Solomon, which I hope he does, because of where I'm going tonight.
Now, I've taken a step for this particular event of not wearing my disguise. I thought I might, but then I decided not to, possibly because if I am recognised, I am excluded. Because they obviously have the right to refuse admission if they don't want. If I am, then that I think will be almost as revealing as what I might learn from anything I hear at this particular event. And I mean, a recording of it's bound to appear sooner or later, so I'll probably be able to review that. But what I'm doing at the moment, I'm going to go as myself and see what happens. I mean, when I bought the ticket, I gave my name. Not my full name, but I call myself Ben Jones. So if they're really on the lookout for me, they may wonder if they know who I am because I've written that article about Marlon Solomon. Then they may know who I am. I commented on his blog, and as I said, he published the comment, but he might decide I'm not to turn up at his event. I don't know. But if so, we'll see what happens. Anyway, I'll let you know, of course, if I am kicked out. But I don't think this is going to, from what I've seen so far, I don't think this is going to be a pleasant experience because this guy's lied. I mean, he's lied quite blatantly. I mean, I don't know if he may mention this, he may not, but certainly he's written on his blog the lie. He's repeated a lie, which I assume he knows is a lie, and that is that it's all to do with a documentary. There's a documentary called The Lizards and the Jews, released in 2000, and Ori Golan, another journalist, posted somewhere that David Icke has to be anti-Semitic to produce a documentary called The Lizards and the Jews. Solomon repeated this on his blog article about David. Now, the documentary The Lizards and the Jews, some of you have already seen it, I know, and you'll know that this is not a production by David Icke. It's a documentary about David Icke. It was produced by World of Wonder TV for Channel 4. It was a bloody awful documentary too. Absolutely lousy. So I'm keen to see if he repeats that, because I didn't actually notice if it's still on his bloody... He may have removed it, actually. I didn't read the entire article. I haven't read it for a couple of years. He may have removed that if he knows it's factually false, in which case, good for him. But it wouldn't take very much checking in the first place to realise that Ori Golan had lied about David Icke. We'll have to see anyway. We'll have to see what it goes. I mean, there may be no trouble. It may be a light-hearted show where everyone's welcome. And I mean, I gave my name in and I called myself Ben Jones. I gave him my email address. I was half expecting some kind of correspondence saying I'd been banned, and they didn't say anything. Now, one thing I didn't do, I haven't told anyone publicly I'm going to this event beforehand, because if I did, the trolls would have been on the phone to the old fire station, to Marlon Solomon, saying, did you know an evil, nasty, racist misogynist is coming to see you? You want to keep him out, because otherwise he'll be hurling chairs around and, and shooting people and stuff like this. Because I know what the trolls will do. And so I haven't told anyone. This is the first time any of my viewers know anything about this. Anyway, it remains to be seen what happens. I'm curious to find out if this evening doesn't go to plan. Well, that'll be quite something to say. I will be interested in that, and probably I'll review a recording of the show when it appears. Okay, I've just left the old fire station at the end of the show. I wasn't turfed out, I was allowed in. And what I've just witnessed over the last 2 hours is one of the worst examples of distortion and misrepresentation that I've ever seen in my life. I'm specifically referring to David Icke, but not just him. It's hard to know when to start, but I've got some notes. I'll get out the city centre and then I'll tell you a bit more. I need to collect my thoughts together. Okay, I'm just going to take a moment now to go through my souvenirs as I walk from the city centre to somewhere I can film. First of all, this is the old fire station brochure, and you can see here. This is on the cover. The featured cover for their upcoming show is Fatty Fat Fat, and it's this lady here, and she's surrounded by what looks like fat naked women. That's rather strange, isn't it? Anyway, here's various other pages here. That's the thing I just been to see. That's the thing that's just gone, and then I'll come on to this in a minute because there's a separate flyer for that. But you see, if you ever want to go and see any of these shows, it's worth. You may see something you like. It's pretty obvious this is quite left wing. I mean, it's quite SJW. I've noticed. Maybe not exclusively, but very much it's set around that. For example, there's this as well. This is something they're featuring called Think Human Festival for Oxford Brookes University, and it says things like this. It's got a program here, a festival program, and I'll just give you some example here. How to be a man. How to be a man. Being male in the age of toxic masculinity. Oh bloody heck. You see, that's sort of a rather loaded title, isn't it? It's a rather loaded title. So I think I'll give that a miss. But feel free to check them out at Old Fire Station, Oxford. You Google that, you'll find it. Now this is interesting. My cross-grade of the Union flag, and this is an art gallery they've got there. And while I was waiting to go into the theatre, I had a quick look around the art gallery. Now this is a photograph project here. It says, but the project arose from my ongoing interest in finding a method of artistic interrogation of nationalism from perspectives of geopolitical and of personal identity. Right, and it goes on like this. You can pause and read if you wish. What this guy's done is he's taken a Union flag and he's hanging up in the gallery, and he's taken images of it through a microscope. So you see the little stitches and threads and fibre of it, and here's just a layout of the gallery here, and he's put this in as an exhibition. And I think it's a kind of piece of conceptual art, which I think maybe suggests it's making some kind of powerful statement about the British identity in the new age of postmodern enlightenment, or something like that, something along those lines. It's probably some piece of cultural Marxist kind of propaganda and all. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I didn't stop to really look at it in detail, but you can have a look through this if you want, and have a look at it through this blurb if you like. I haven't bothered yet because I'm a bit tired and I've been focusing on Marlon's show, but it is quite kind of it is very new left, I must say, the old fire station, you know. But it's nice in there. They've got a bar. It's very clean. It's very pleasant, and let's have a look at this show minute, page 24. I think that's what this is about. Here we go. Fatty Fat Fat. Kate Greenhall and Daisy Hale present. Do you ever feel like your body takes up too much space in the world and doesn't want to make any room? Well, yeah, Kate is fat. She's pretty much always been fat and probably will be fat forever. Well, she's not bad looking though, I must say. Some sort of overweight women are attractive, I think. It goes on about that. Anyway, you can go and see that if you want. It's on wherever that is. You saw it in the dates anyway. This looks good. This actually looks good. Actually, Juliet and Romeo. Juliet and Romeo reveal the true story of Romeo and Juliet. It turns out they didn't die in tragic misunderstandings. They grew up and lived happily ever after. Oh God, yes. Now they're 40ish. feel constantly mocked by their teenage selves. Oh, right. Friday 27th of March. That looks quite funny, actually. I think it's a comedy. Romeo and Juliet, of course, the Shakespeare tragedy about a star-crossed lovers who they end up both committing suicide because of some awful... They have some plan and it goes wrong terribly, and I don't want to spoil it for you, but it's a classic tale, and they end up being so upset by what happened that they both die by their own hands. It's yeah, I'll have them laughing in the aisles, as they said in the movie about it. So that's my souvenirs for this particular adventure. I probably won't hang on to them. But if you see anything you like and you're in the Oxford area, old fire station, check it out. Well, I'll start with something a bit more pleasant, and that's talking about the venue. The Old Fire Station is the name of the theatre, and believe it or not, it used to be a nightclub, and I remember when it was a nightclub. Rather seedy place, actually, where, you know, hospital porters sometimes hung out after a late shift. We used to head down there and stuff like that, but so it's not been in there actually since those days. So it's the first time I've actually been in there where it's a theatre. Anyway, I was allowed. There was no problems. I mean, I sort of slipped in. I got in there and just handed my ticket over. There was no security people checking us over. There's no hit list of there's no some guy with a clipboard and like a photographs and thinking and names. So yeah, I went in there and I sat down, and it opened up with as everyone was walking in, they were showing loads of videos of various conspiracy theorists doing like vlogs and stuff like that, and I thought, oh my god, I hope I don't appear on there. And I didn't actually. I didn't, but yeah, there was people like Flat Earthers and a little kid with a tinfoil hat, and you know Ronald, who it's actually a clip from What Happened on the Moon, David Percy and Mary Bennett's film about the moon landings, and about the Coke bottle scene. There's Brother Nathaniel, Phil Schneider doing a talk, and then on comes older Marlon, and he walks up. He's a sort of middle-aged, quite thin chap, little beard, you know, and you've seen a photo of him, and he says, "Hello everybody, I'm Jewish." And I thought, right, okay. We slip it into the introduction, you know, as if we're supposed to go, oh my god, or something like that. And he showed a photo of himself as a kid, and he talks about how he begins by just giving us a bit of a bio about how he lost his faith and stuff like that, and then he does a lot of funny sketches where he plays most of the characters in his funny sketches that are on the screen, like the little clips, video clips. One of them, he went into a hairdresser, and the hairdresser said, "Oh, have you heard about the Jews? You know what they do? They bite off the end of babies' dicks and they drink the blood," and stuff like this. And of course this ties in with the old blood libel of the Middle Ages. And Marlon said, "Oh, it's not true." Well, it's not true, yeah. But the thing about it is, it's true. I mean, it is actually not true. But he's making a point. The reason he puts this in there is because this hairdresser happened to believe it, and I know there are people who believe it, and then that then is attached to the identity of people like me. So even if you do say it's not true, you're still guilty though, because this is what he does. He how do I explain this? He then, everything else in his talk was essentially designed to paste that kind of image onto people like me. It's like one of these. It's like feminists, you know, will say because a woman gets raped, then all men are rapists and things like that. It's that kind of straw manning, that kind of labelling and marginalising of people, putting them in boxes. He says that he actually was he had a friend who sent him loads of links to conspiracy stuff and things like that. And then he said, I went through this website, and then suddenly I found links to Holocaust denial, people saying Jews did the Nice attacks and stuff like that. I'm familiar with the Nice attacks. This is where a lorry allegedly drove down a road and killed several hundred people. For some reason they couldn't get out of the way, even though there was a beach on one side and many streets off the other side. But anyway, Nick Collerstrom has looked into that, and I did a show with him about it. And I think we should be suspicious of the official story of those attacks. But Nope, I've not seen, I mean, I certainly don't believe, and I've not seen any web pages where it says that this was the work of the Jewish people. I've not seen that. Now, I'm sure such web pages exist, but they're not a part of mainstream conspiratorial ideas. I'm sure they're not. Then it comes up to the Protocols. Now, the Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion. This is a book published in 1897 by Sergei Nilis in Russia. It was it became very, very popular, and it talks about the New World Order. Now, I won't go into this in too much detail because I've done an entire video on this subject, which I'll put a link to in the description box. But basically, Marlon says, but this whole book was a hoax. And yet, on one level it is, because it was actually copied. It was a copy of some earlier works. There's a book called Dialogue in Hell by Maurice Joly, Biarritz by Hermann Goethe. What's the other one? I think there's another one. There's 3 different sources from which it was plagiarised. The fact of the matter is, though, if you go through the Protocols, it has the word Jews. It names Jews as the instigators of this New World Order and the methodology they use. And the methodology is actually correct. And you see the same thing in things such as Silent Weapons for a Quiet War, Unveiling Them, The Secret Covenant. These other documents, which are astonishingly similar and much more recent, which also talk about the methods that you can use, a kind of do-it-yourself guide to taking over the world. So obviously the Protocols were copied from Joly and Biarritz and all these other things, and Goethe. But where did Goethe and Joly get their ideas from? That's the point. So that is why I'd say read the Protocols, but do bear in mind it's not really a Jewish document. Someone has basically inserted the word Jews in there, because there's literally no reference to Jews at all apart from the word Jews. There's no mention of Jewish holidays, Jewish beliefs, Jewish ideas, Jewish rights, Jewish culture. It just says Jews. That's all it says. And I've done an entire video on that, and there's a link in the description box to that. Oh yeah, he mentions Joe Cox a couple of times, and of course, well, Joe Cox, God knows what's happened to him. The Rich Planet TV show is worth looking into for that. I really do recommend that, so the Rich Planet TV show for that. Solomon's basic idea is that because he castigates David Icke for mentioning, I think, a very valid point. You know, the strange behaviour of Brendan Cox on the day after his wife was killed, things like that. And then Marlon Solomon, he does this same old thing. Do you remember my poem? You know, what was it called? It's basically, my mind's still numb after all that shit. I wrote a poem about how they moral blackmail you into believing official stories by saying that if you believe the unofficial story, I mean, if you believe alternative views about things, then you're evil. You're not just wrong, you're evil for believing this. So if you believe, for example, that the Sandy Hook shootings were faked, they were staged, well, it's not that you're wrong. I mean, no one has to prove you wrong, because you're just evil. You don't care about kids and things like that, and things like that. So it doesn't matter how factual you are. It doesn't matter if you don't go call up the parents and give them death threats and things like that, right? It doesn't matter. If you do that, you're still evil. I mean, you've got this with Joe Cox. He brings this up twice in his talk, and he brings up the definition of conspiracy theories. Why do people believe in them? What is a conspiracy theory? Oh yeah, well, of course there are real conspiracies, but a conspiracy theory is where people theorise about conspiracy when another more likely explanation exists. He also said people believe in conspiracy theories because it's empowering. There's different kinds of conspiracies: systemic conspiracies, super conspiracies, event conspiracies. So basically, that's just a copy, basically, of what other people, such as Professor Karen Douglas, has said, and Lindsay Porter in her book Culture of Conspiracy, which I've read. I've done a review of that. That's not very original stuff, and I think he's just looked at these sources, and he's just, I mean, he's believed them, and he maybe hasn't looked at alternative. I've already done a critique of those things, and I can assure you that conspiracy theory is simply a normal part of the world, of politics, and very often there's many things that we don't call conspiracy theories because they've been proven true. I mean, you just have to Google conspiracy theories proven true, and there's a whole load of them. The Watergate scandal was originally a conspiracy theory by conspiracy theorists who tried to uncover it. Lots of people didn't believe them, thought they were crazy. Then it all comes out and President Nixon resigns. Conspiracy theory proven true, now part of history. And this is... it's not theorising because there's another explanation that's better. We've got good reasons for thinking as we do. If we're theorising about a conspiracy, we've got good reasons for doing so. So that was more of that, indeed. Oh, and he comes up, he mentions the Labour Party a few times, but then the biggest problem I have with what he's said, the biggest problem, is when he comes on to David Icke. He dedicates a massive amount of his talk to discussing David Icke. Just adjusting I've done 3 pages of notes here. Now, it's the usual thing. It's the usual old story, same old story. David Icke says lizards when he means Jews. This goes right the way back to the Guardian article in 1993. A Guardian journalist attended one of David's talks, and they wrote a piece called New Age Nazi at Large in Britain, and then the illustration was a picture of Adolf Hitler doing a speech, standing in a uniform, doing a Nuremberg rally, with David Icke's face put over the front of his head, photoshopped onto the front of his head. That article has, or the ideas in that article have resurfaced numerous times over the intervening years. Again and again and again. It comes in like, it ebbs and flows like the tide. At the moment the tide's a long way in and we're getting a lot of it now. But basically it happened in 2000 in Canada. If you watch that, The Lizards and the Jews, which David didn't produce, as I said earlier, that basically documents the attacks on him in 2000 in Canada. So that's 20 years ago. It's come back now. David is... this is a perennial thing. It's a perennial thing that happens. Now what is Marlon decided to look into it, and to give him credit, he went out and he got David Icke's book, The Global Conspiracy and How to End It. It's probably the best of the most sort of generic David Icke books, so he wouldn't have known it, but it's probably the best thing he could have got. He went out and got the David Icke Guide to the Global Conspiracy and How to End It. That was the last David Icke book I read. And he comes out and says, well, David Icke is anti-Semitic, and he plays a few clips from David's talk in Brixton. Well, I was actually in the audience, one of the David Icke's talks in Brixton, which was a 12-hour show. Marlon Solomon plays just a few minutes of it, and he accuses us of cherry-picking data, where David talks about Rothschild's Zionism. Now, in the process of his talk, David explains very comprehensively how Jews are not to blame for the global conspiracy. They are not to blame. And that they must... And he says it in as many words, and he says it exactly why. And if you watch all of it, the David Icke's work, and you read like a lot much more than Solomon is presenting, you will see very clearly that David, it's calling him a racist, and anti-Semitism is a form of racism. It's the lowest form of slander. It really is. David actually explains, I mean, when David talks about the protocols, he renames them, he calls them the Illuminati protocols, specifically for the reasons that I've just said, and he explains why in his talk, The Robots Rebellion, his 1994 talk in Liverpool. And you can get that on YouTube now, it's available for free. I got the VHS when it came out. Absolutely, he explains exactly why he chose to highlight the protocols of Zion. He says that it's about the methodology within them, which is why he actually chooses to do it, and he chooses to bring this out with a very long detailed disclaimer about how no prejudice or hostility must be shown towards Jewish people as a result. Now, one thing that Solomon repeats over and over again is that if you talk about Zionism, you are being anti-Semitic. I don't believe that's the case at all. And what's more, there are Jewish politicians. I'm doing it myself now, aren't I? There are Israeli politicians who say this. They actually say, we know that when people criticise Israel, we know they're not racists who hate Jews, but we conflate them anyway. It's a trick we use. They've said it in as many words. And now Solomon is doing the same thing. I mean, I'm not saying he's doing it deliberately. I'm not saying he's a Mossad shill or anything like that. But he is repeating this rubbish. He's repeating this distortion, this deliberate hoax to ring-fence an entire fiefdom from criticism. So they're hoping that people will just be so scared of being called a racist that when Israel can just do what it likes, and not get do what it likes and not get any criticism from anyone in the world. I mean, David has talked about the whole relationship between Jews and Zionism. There's many other people as well. Gilad Atzmon, Norman Finkelstein. David quotes these people. These people are Jewish themselves. There's Ilan Pappé. Now he wrote a book, the one, and Ian R. Crane talks about him. I mean, I'm not saying he's a Mossad shell, and of course, maybe he's come into these ideas because of attacks on Jews. I mean, for example, he's right about, for example, the synagogue shootings in Pittsburgh, the fact that the halal butchers in Manchester have been attacked by people. There's been, graffiti sprayed with the Star of David and 9/11 in various places. Of course, I suppose if you are on the receiving end of that, I mean, it's easy to want to do something to stop it, as I do, as many as I do when, I hear people saying white people are all evil or men are all rapists and things like that. If you're heterosexual, there's something wrong with you. When I hear things like that, I feel very under attack too, because that's my people being targeted, my group being targeted. But it doesn't justify deceit, and it doesn't justify repeating deceit. Rather, I'm not saying he's actively being deceitful, but he's spreading deceit. He's disseminating falsehoods. I mean, he mentions quite rightly, he says, well, Jews have suffered a lot, and they have. I mean, the pogroms in Russia, yeah. The Nazis, the way the Nazis persecuted them, yeah. But sometimes I just want to say, yeah, okay, I'm sorry that happened. And now stop lying, or stop spreading lies, stop repeating lies. I think what I really despise about what Marlon Solomon said is that when he sees attacks on halal butchers, Jewish graves being vandalised, things like that, he holds David Icke specifically responsible for is the right word incitement? I think so. I think that's what he's suggesting. It's some form of incitement. He says Jews are dehumanised. David depicts Jews as lizards, and this again, we come back to this whole thing that's been going on now since David Icke came out with this lizard theory. As John Ronson said 20 years ago, when he means lizards, does he mean lizards or does he mean Jews? Well, he means lizards. And the evidence that Solomon presents is the images of humanoid reptilians, and they have Israeli flags on them. Therefore, Israeli flags on a bad guy means hatred of Jews, hatred of all Jews, even those going back to before Israel was created. I don't get it. It's not even original. It's just the same old bullshit that people have been saying about David for all these years. Oh, let's have a look. And he complains. Marlon Solomon complains. He says, he said all the anti-racists that are complaining about Nick Griffin speaking and Tommy Robinson, where are they when David Icke appears? David Icke filling out Wembley Arena, there were no protests. Well, that's now changed. It's changed largely thanks to people like Solomon, because we hear all this paranoid nonsense about how David Icke hates Jews and wants to kill Jews and is inciting people to kill Jews. And anyone who's studied David Icke's work in any detail knows what an evil lie that is and how completely wrong it is. That got him banned from an entire country, Australia. He was banned from Australia. He has had venues cancelled. You've seen my review of Renegade. I was incredibly lucky. I'm one of the few people who's actually seen Renegade on the big screen. There were only 2 showings of it. David had a whole tour planned of showings of Renegade. They were cancelled one by one, knocked down by nasty people committing censorship and people believe in it, and gutless venue organisers capitulating. And again, this is something that's been going on for so long. So I was lucky to even seen that film on the big screen. Marlon also says that David Icke makes a lot of money off these things. Oh, here we go again. See, I'm gonna have to repeat it again. Yep. Marlon Solomon says David Icke is rich. This is making money for him. Well, David Icke quit a job as a TV presenter to do what he's doing today. And he earns a living. So bloody what? Did the Communist Party take power in the night? What's wrong with a man earning a living? He earns a decent living. Why shouldn't he? But when he started off, he did his first show in Devizes Town Hall. He put out the chairs himself. He put them away afterwards, and ended up poor. He left poorer than he'd started as. That's what I'm trying to find a quieter place to film because I'm not done yet. David didn't know. I mean, he didn't know he'd ever be able to make a living from what he did. But he basically quit a career as a TV presenter. And how much do they get paid? This is a riches to rags story, the ultimate one. But if only Marlon Solomon was the only person repeating this slanderous shit. I mean, really, it borders on libel. It really does. I don't know if David knows about what's. I mean, if there's a recording of Solomon's talk, I'll spread it around. I'll say, look, this is what Solomon's saying about you. Now, he talks about this. There's this book, Warrant for Genocide, which is a critical examination of the protocols. And indeed, you see, the protocols were used by real anti-Semites, yes they exist, real anti-Semites to persecute Jews in the most horrible way, especially in Russia and of course in Germany. But if I understand correctly, Solomon is actually saying that David Icke's ideas are like that. He has this book, Warrant for Genocide. It was like a book all about the protocols and what they, how people used them, and people read it and believed it, and they believed literally the Jewish thing in it, and they just went out and said, we better go and kill some Jews then, and things like that. And David is somehow responsible for that, or David is somehow tolerant of that, or is inciting it, or is somehow dangerous in that way. What the fuck? As if David would ever countenance behaviour like that. Oh, and I think this is directly libelous, actually. He says that David Icke's a Holocaust denier. David Icke is not has actually never denied the Holocaust. Never. I mean, I don't know what the legal side of that thing is, but David should get himself a lawyer, I think. He really should, because David has never, ever... I don't think David even referred to the Holocaust a couple of times. I think where Solomon might have got this idea from, because he certainly didn't get it from any of David Icke's works, because David Icke never said it, is that David has stood up for people like Ernst Sundell. He stood up for people like Ernst Sundell, Alan Chablow, people like that. People who are Holocaust revisionists, who have been persecuted through the law for just expressing their opinions. And of course you are branded if you actually stand up for people's right to free speech, whether you agree with that free speech or not, you know, you get castigated the same way. There's this French guy actually, whose name I can't remember, but he's just been like, well, he got a suspended sentence for talking about I think it was something, it was landed neo-Nazi or fascist or something. What's his name? I can't remember. He's an old French guy, an intellectual. And he got a suspended sentence on condition he donates to some charities or other. And the lawyer representing him was prosecuted himself and received a fine for doing his job by ensuring this man had a fair trial. You understand? It doesn't matter. Oh God. That is a typical Oxford scene you see there. Lots of... Oh, where are we? Over here. See them behind me? Lots of drunk young people. That's Oxford for you. And it's only Wednesday. Wait till Friday comes. You must realise it doesn't matter what your opinion is. It doesn't matter what you think about what people are saying. It doesn't even matter if you are highly offended by things that people are saying. They have a right to say them. How do you think I feel when I go on Twitter and I see... Hang on, it's a bit noisier. So there's a muck on the ground that's going to get around that. So how do you think I feel when I go on Twitter and I see massive numbers of posts onto #KillAllWhiteMen? How do you think that makes me feel? I mean, you know, Marlon Solomon, if you're watching, you know, you're not the only person in the world who is threatened, persecuted, abused. Right now in South Africa, white people are being exterminated by a campaign of genocide. Okay, yeah, Jews have had a shitty deal, and I'm sorry about that. And I denounce anyone who harms Jews or anyone else for being who they are, and I really do. And I'm sorry that happened, but you're not the only ones. And you know what? I can still stand up and say that the people who say that have the right to free speech, if anyone wants to put on #KillAllWhiteMen, I won't try to stop them. I won't report their tweets. I won't try and get their accounts closed. I won't try to get them deplatformed. Let them speak openly as possible. I want to know who they are. Let them shout what they say from the rooftop so everyone can see it and see how evil it is. Oh yeah. And I've been accused. I'm not a Holocaust denier actually myself. I do believe that the Nazis persecuted Jews and they killed them in vast numbers, and that was reprehensible. I denounce that totally. But I do stand up for the free speech of people who think otherwise, including Nick Colstrom, who's a good friend of mine. And he actually features in this talk, I should add. I'll come to that in a minute. And honestly, you know, what's awful is, if I say one more word on this subject, some of the people watching this video could go to jail, depending where you are in the world. This is why I can't say any more on this subject. I really can't. I think if people find the Holocaust should be treated as a historical event, and historical events should be open to reinterpretation and should be open to scholarly study. I don't believe it should be ring-fenced from all examination. But I'm like I said, the Nazis they killed vast numbers of Jews, innocent people, and that was awful. Yeah, so he goes on, and I'm just going to get my notes in order. I've got three, like I said, I've got 3 pages of notes here. Just one moment. Right, where have I got to? Oh yeah, Marlon is an ex-conspiracy theorist, he said. He said, oh yeah, I really got into conspiracy theories because I was with some mates once when I was young, and we started watching Loose Change, and then we watched Zeitgeist and things like that. And but I very quickly saw through it. But I got really annoyed with my fellow my sheeple friends who couldn't see it, man. They just couldn't see it because they were closed-minded, you know. But then he's now reformed. He's a reformed character apparently, and he's like he is now he's now denounced his past. Well, you see, I mean, one of the reasons he may have denounced his past is because Loose Change doesn't really get into the... Loose Change is actually quite... The skeptics have attacked Loose Change for some of its factual errors, which are unfortunately true. For example, they're talking about thermite and things like that, which of course is not true. As I've said before, it's when you get into Dr. Judy Wood and her book, Where Do the Towers Go, and things like that, that's when it all makes sense. That's when it all fits together. And so I think a lot of people get into 9/11 conspiracies, and they fall out of them very quickly because they come across the official unofficial story. I mean, Andrew Johnson has written a whole book about this, and he's not right about every situation and individual he mentions, but he is right about the general theme here, that the people who did it are quite pleased when people come up with fake alternative stories about thermite and planes hitting the buildings and things like that. They quite like that because they know that eventually these things will be demolished, and then people go, wow, well, maybe the official story was true after all. So I think Marlon may have been a victim of this kind of propaganda. One thing he says all the time is that conspiracy theories are miserable and they're disempowering because we always see whoever's doing it, them, as hyper competent. Now this is a point I've raised, and Marlon is actually partly right here because there are people in the truth movement who do this, and I've done videos about this, how they see that basically everything is controlled, everything that happens is a result of the conspiracy, everything, absolutely everything, they can just do everything. They're completely and utterly unable. They're completely all-powerful. Well, of course they're not. And this comes up again in the end of the talk. I'll come to that in a minute. The conspirators are not all-powerful. And as Marlon says, well, what about Brexit then? How about Brexit? How did that happen if the EU is part of this New World Order agenda? Well, exactly. And that's my point. That's what I've said many, many times. So, and then he comes up to Richie Allen and he says, oh, David Icke was on Richie Allen's show. Richie Allen is a Manchester-based radio show, and I hate having this horrible anti-Semite racist in my city because he has David Icke on. And he says David Icke, is affiliated to Richie Allen, and Richie Allen has David Duke on, he has Alison Shablow, he has lots of other people, including people from Momentum in the Labour Party, and things like that. Now, and he mentions Veterans Today as well, like this, and about how these things are all linked together, and it's all anti-Semitism. And even if people don't say they're anti-Semitic, they are really, because they're connected with these people. And he actually quotes Nick Holostrom. I'm going to tell Nick that who mentioned on here. Nick was talking about his book Breaking the Spell, and because Nick is on a radio show giving his opinion about the Big H, suddenly it's evil, it's wrong, and that Richie Allen is evil for even hosting this man on there. It's, again, I mean, if you disagree with Nick, you think Nick's wrong, why not just say so? Why not just say so? Why not just say Nick's wrong? As I said, if Richie wanted to, I know he wouldn't do it probably, but if he wanted to have like some radical feminist on there who says all white men should be castrated or something, I wouldn't complain. I mean, I would despise the person. I'd be up in arms about anything like that, but to stop them from speaking, no, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. And you know what? Some feminists actually do say that. They do say things like that. And what's more, this is an important point. This is ancient history. Marlon needs to do his homework a bit better and come up to date. David Icke and Richie Allen are kind of falling out. They don't really have much to do with each other anymore. I don't know exactly how deep that goes, but I know David Icke is not affiliated now to Richie Allen in any way. Again, and he also mentions Piers Corbyn. Now, Piers Corbyn's he mentions Piers Corbyn as one of these horrible people. Piers Corbyn is a bloody meteorologist. He studies the weather. He's a climatologist. I don't think he says anything about Jews or Zionism or anything like that. And again, you see, when he brings up the Labour Party, I mean, this is something I've covered before. The Labour Party anti-Semitism scandal, right? Well, the thing about it is, this is what you don't get told in the mainstream, and the Labour are in a bit of a quandary about this. I think I've mentioned this on a previous video, is that they're caught now in a corner between the risk of being anti-Semitic and being Islamophobic, because most of this anti-Semitism is coming from the radical Islamists who have infiltrated the party. And you can't tackle them because they're Islamophobic, can't you? And the other part of it is just simply the fake anti-Semitism of people who just question the policies of Israel. You know, often a lot of them are white people, they're not Muslim, but they just are opposed to Israel, they support the Palestinians. Jeremy Corbyn comes under this category of so-called anti-Semitic person. He's a member of the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign, and of course, as I've said, Israel like to do this. Like, if people are opposed to their policies, you just brand them as hating Jews. You just say they hate Jews, obviously. They must hate Jews. That's why they're against the bombing of Gaza. They hate Jews, they want to kill all Jews. And it's a trick they use. And he mentions George Galloway as well. George Galloway was on Richie Allen's show. Galloway has explained this. I mean, whatever you think of George Galloway, and I'm sort of like I don't like everything he says, but he said he's right about this. This is a country that has made itself immune from any criticism. I mean, how many countries can say that? Look at how much Britain's criticised. Look at how much the United States are criticised. Imagine if we did that. Imagine if we in the UK said, okay, if you say anything bad about anything the British government has done, not the British people, the British government, you're a racist. Therefore, no one will dare question anything the British government does. This is essentially what Israel have done, and they have an Israel lobby. They have AIPAC in the United States. They have the Israel lobby here in Britain, and they wine and dine these guys. They take them to Israel. They get them laid, things like that. These various politicians, they make themselves look really good, and it's unfair. It's unfair that they should just set themselves up as people who just cannot be criticised. And Marlon, whether he knows it or not, Marlon is helping them. He's helping them by spreading this same falsehood. Oh. So David Icke was going to appear in Manchester, and Marlon got him banned. Marlon helped. Well, it wasn't just him, I think, but he was one of the figureheads of this campaign to get him banned. He's banned from Manchester United Conference Centre. And Marlon was, he felt good about that because he's a City fan, yeah. But now we have David Icke protests everywhere. In fact, Momentum, carried out a anti-David Icke protest, and other members of Momentum quit because they like David Icke. And it's like Momentum is kind of like the left Labour tendency. It's a bit like the what used to be the militant tendency, similar to that. And organisation within an organisation, and yeah, they a lot of them quit in protest. And Marlon sings a couple of funny songs where he reads out the Facebook comments. I must admit, it's quite on the technical level, it's quite an entertaining show. It's got some laughs. Marlon, he did like a hip hop thing, and there's some songs, and there's like these little clip vignettes, as I explained. So. Yes, Labour has a problem with anti-Semitism, but calling people, saying that people who are part of it are those who simply criticise Israel and want to say if they have Palestinian friends and these people get blown up by an Israeli bomb or something like that, they want that to stop. And wanting that to stop does not mean you hate Jews. I don't want to see that happen. I don't want to see bombs going off in Israel either. I don't want to see any Israelis getting hurt either. In a sense, going all the way back to 1946 and the King David Hotel bombing, violence on both sides has racked the Holy Land continuously. And stopping, blaming one side and saying the other side are lily white and pure and you can't question them is not the solution, Marlon. It's not the solution. I mean, I changed my position over this because I used to say let's go back to old Palestine, and I'm not so sure about that now, because going back in history always causes trouble. But whatever the solution to the Israeli-Arab conflict, calling one side pure, an enlightened democracy, was it an island of... What is it Douglas Murray says? Oh, it's an island of freedom and democracy in the cesspit of... Oh, he didn't use those words, but he basically says that Israel's a great place because it's free and democratic and all the rest is Islamic authoritarian and stuff like that. Well, see, they're Islamic authoritarian because the CIA and Mossad have been bloody breeding these people with ISIS and stuff like that. Israel itself is not above... I'm not saying Israel is evil. No nation is evil, completely evil, and its people certainly are not. But we should be allowed to criticise it freely without being called names. And then at the end he ends his talk with a happy note. He says, well, look at all the good things that are happening. Conspiracy theories are so awful because they're predicting so much terrible disaster and so much nastiness and endless misery and 1984 and Brave New World and things like that. But look what's happening in the world. The population isn't dying. Child literacy rates are increasing. Life expectancy is increasing. Extreme poverty has dropped from 31% to 10%. Look, humpback whales are no longer endangered. Sweden has just banned deforestation. All these other good things are happening. And see, you don't have to believe in conspiracy theories. Look at the good things in the world. Isn't it wonderful? Well, you know what? That's true. That's absolutely true. And I'm the first to join Marlon in celebrating that wonderful fact that things in many ways are improving, especially since 2016, but even before then, if things were slowing down. Because you know what? The New World Order are not hyper-incompetent. The Illuminati are not hyper-incompetent. Who's really doing this? Who are the reptilians? Who are the real bad guys behind this agenda for the New World Order? Well, the reptilian form is actually what psychically sensitive people see. They see people shapeshift into reptilians, and it's got nothing to do with Jews. It's got nothing. People of all races have had this experience, and the people they see shapeshifting are all races. It happens across the world. It's been happening throughout history, including places like South Africa that never even saw a Jew until a few hundred years ago. So, how do you explain that, Marlon, eh? But they're not all powerful. They are the Illuminati, as we call them. They're not all powerful, and you know what? Their power is weakening. And I feel very happy and optimistic. I'm a conspiracy theorist. I'm not only a conspiracy theorist with a heart and a mind. I'm a conspiracy theorist who looks at the world, what's coming, the future, with hope. I really do. So that's really all I can say about this. I mean, it's a very unoriginal piece. It's a very unoriginal presentation with information. The information that Marlon puts across, especially about David Icke, is not new. It's been floating around for several decades now. Ever since David Icke first came out as a conspiracy theorist in the early 90s, this has been coming and going. It's been hanging over his head. It's been hanging over all our bloody heads. And it's the same thing. The same thing has been said before, and Marlon is just repeating it. It is misrepresentation. It is total distortion. It's a complete and utter sham of who David Icke is and what he actually stands for and the things he says. It's utterly slanderous what Marlon's been saying about David Icke, and he should be ashamed of himself for it. He really should. It's because people will believe this. People will see what Marlon has to say and they'll believe it. Marlon was complaining because people just read slanderous material about Jews, and they just believe it, and they go out and commit some pogrom. Well, in that case, I would join him in telling people not to just believe nasty things you hear about Jews. I would say Marlon is right to warn people not just to believe every nasty thing you hear about Jews. As I said before about the blood libel thing, the hairdresser told him. Right? But the same goes for people like David Icke. The same goes for conspiracy theorists. Because somebody might watch Marlon's show and they might decide, well, you know, David Icke has to be shut down somehow. And we all know where that leads. We all know where that kind of thing leads. So what Marlon is doing is not only immoral, I think it's reckless. So I'm glad I went to the show, I really am. I'm glad I went along. It's worth seeing what he had to say. And what he had to say is completely unsurprising, and it's things I've heard before. And it's basically based on his entire article that I've read or reread. I've already criticised it, I've already taken it apart. So nothing new under the sun. I'm glad, like I said, I'm glad I went to it, and if you want to go and see it, if he does another show like this, by all means go and see it, but really, it's probably, if you're familiar with David and the people who criticise him, it'll be things you've heard before. So, thank you everyone for watching Hapanwo TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order.